So the Pixel 10a is finally out, but you already know how this goes. The second one new Pixel launches, the internet immediately starts looking ahead to Google's next flagship. And right now, all eyes are slowly shifting toward the Pixel 11 series, especially what could be the Pixel 11 Pro XL. Now, before we go any further, this is still very early. We're talking leaks, case-maker clues, and prototype benchmark listings, not official Google announcements. But even with limited info, these early details can give us a surprisingly good idea of what Google might be testing behind the scenes, and what direction the Pixel 11 could take in 2026. Let's start with the first real design hint, because this one is interesting: an accessory listing. A case company called Thynorn recently posted a product listing for a Pixel 11 Pro XL case and included a couple of early renders. And yes, case-maker leaks aren't always perfect. Sometimes they're based on rumors, sometimes they're based on early CAD files, and sometimes they're just guesses designed to get their listings online early. But in many past launches, these accessory leaks have ended up being pretty close to the final design, especially when multiple case brands show the same cutouts. And from what these renders suggest, the Pixel 11 Pro XL might not be going for a dramatic redesign. At first glance, the overall silhouette looks extremely familiar. The size, the general thickness, the corner curves, everything points to Google playing it safe with the body shape, likely refining what worked rather than reinventing the phone. But there are two small design changes that stand out right away, and both of them focus on the iconic Pixel camera bar. First, the camera bar might stick out less. Pixel phones have become instantly recognizable because of that bold camera bar stretching across the back, and in recent generations, it's also been one of the most noticeable protrusions on any flagship phone. According to the case cutout in these early renders, the opening looks slightly shallower, which could mean the camera bump may not protrude as much this time. Now, there are a few ways Google could pull that off. They could slightly adjust the internal layout, change the lens stack, tweak sensor thickness, or even use a redesigned camera module structure. And if they actually manage to reduce the bump without downgrading camera hardware, that would be a small but meaningful quality of life upgrade, less wobble on a table, a more comfortable feel in the hand, and potentially a cleaner look overall. Second, the camera bar shape itself may be changing. Instead of the longer, more oval-like bar shape we've seen recently, this one looks a bit wider and more rounded, almost like a softer rectangle. It's not a huge difference, but it's enough to make the back of the phone look slightly more modern and less tube-like. And if Google is adjusting the camera bar geometry, it could also suggest internal camera rearrangement. Maybe different sensor sizes, new periscope tuning, or simply a new aesthetic direction to separate the Pixel 11 lineup from the Pixel 10 generation. But honestly, as interesting as the design hints are, the biggest rumor so far isn't about how the Pixel 11 looks. It's about how it unlocks. According to leaks, Google is reportedly testing a more advanced face authentication system internally, said to be called Project Tuscana. And the goal sounds pretty clear: bring Pixel Face Unlock closer to Apple's Face ID level of security and reliability. Right now, Pixel Face Unlock has improved compared to earlier attempts, but in many situations, it still doesn't feel like the gold standard. Depending on the model and implementation, performance can vary in low light, and there's always been that lingering question for users: is this secure enough for everything I want to do? What makes this new rumor so important is the mention of infrared hardware. If Google is actually exploring an IR-based system, similar in concept to what Apple uses, it could mean more accurate depth mapping, better performance in dark environments, and more consistent authentication across different lighting conditions. And according to the source behind the leak, the system has already been tested under multiple lighting scenarios, with results reportedly comparable to the iPhone Face Unlock experience. If that holds true and Google ships it, we could be looking at one of the biggest Pixel security upgrades in years, not just a convenience feature, but a serious biometric authentication improvement. Of course, there's a big question here. Would Google add extra sensors to the front of the phone? Because a true Face ID style setup typically involves more than just a standard selfie camera. It could mean changes to the front camera cutout, bezel area, sensor array, or display integration. And if Google is trying to keep the design clean while adding more hardware, that's not a simple engineering challenge. Still, if the Pixel 11 Pro XL ends up with a more secure, IR-assisted face unlock system, that would instantly become a headline feature, especially for people who want fast unlocking that works at night, works at angles, and feels truly flagship grade. Now, let's talk performance, because no new Pixel flagship conversation is complete. Without the Tensor chip, a Geekbench listing recently popped up showing what could be the next generation Tensor processor, reportedly the Tensor G6, with the codename Kodiak. And if this leak is accurate, it raises a few eyebrows. For one, the configuration described is unusual, a 7-core CPU setup, including a high-performance core running at around 4.11 GHz, combined with additional performance cores. There's also mention of a PowerVR GPU, which is especially interesting because it differs from what many people expect based on recent flagship trends. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. The benchmark scores are extremely low, and when you see unusually weak Geekbench results tied to a chip that's supposedly next-gen, it typically means one thing: early prototype hardware, pre-production silicon, unoptimized software, debug builds, power limits. Basically, a device that's not meant to represent final performance. So while it's tempting to look at those numbers and panic, you really shouldn't. Early benchmarks can be wildly misleading, especially when the hardware and software are months away from being finalized.